Okay, good morning. Well, one last time on Wittgenstein before our much-needed spring break. Okay, so there's a negative part to Wittgenstein's points and a positive part, and so far we've really been focusing on the negative part of Wittgenstein's point. Today I want to carry on focusing on the negative point because it's actually quite difficult to understand what his positive picture is unless you take fully seriously the negative point that he's making. And I'd also like to compare and contrast a little bit Putnam and Wittgenstein because I think there are very clear points of contact between them, though at first it looks as if Wittgenstein's coming from a place that is very alien to the people we've been looking at so far up to Wittgenstein. So the general problem he's dealing with is not that for each word you've got something in your head that tells you how to use the word. Right? Does that sound familiar? Whether or not you believe it? There couldn't be something in your head that tells you how to use the word because anything in your head has to be explained. There has to be some way you can explain the meaning of the thing in your head. And the only way you can explain it ultimately is by giving examples, by actually using the word. That's the line of argument. But then if there isn't a standard for right or wrong, that raises a real basic question. How could there be such a thing as truth or falsity? Getting it right or wrong on your use of the word. You don't have any standard against which to judge your use of the word. And Wittgenstein's picture is that the great mistake is to think that to find the standard of right or wrong, you've got to look inside the mind of the person using the sign. Instead of, the idea is the natural picture one has is you've got to look inward to find the source of language, to find where the standards of right and wrong are. But actually, you should look out. You should look at the context, the customs or practices inside which your use of the sign is located. So one way to put it is, the natural picture is that your use of a word is just the outward manifestation of your inner understanding of it. Your inner understanding is the core thing. But that core inner state is a myth. There are only the customs or practices. Anything that could be inside your mind could only be an interpretation of the sign. You could give a definition of a sign in terms of other signs. That part's all right. But that's all you could have in your mind. But at some point, you've got to explain how these definitions themselves have to be understood. Any interpretation needs itself to be understood. And in the end, it can't be a matter of giving more and more definitions inside your head. And here's Wittgenstein. But how can a rule show me what to do at this point? Because really, I mean, that's the point about the guy who goes 97, 103, 42, 1. Yeah, he can keep that form of words inside his head. He can have the same thing inside his head as you. But anything you do is, on some interpretation, in accord with that very rule. So what we ought to say is not, we're going to look inside for some way of interpreting the sign that really tells you what to do. Rather, any interpretation still hangs in the air. An interpretation is just substituting one sign for another. Hangs in the air in the sense that it's still waiting to be given meaning. So what does give support to your use of the sign? Not just more interpretations. So that's the basic point here. This algorithm in your head, the x plus 1, that just hangs in the air. It waits to be explained. You still don't understand what this means. And the only way you have of explaining it is by locating the use of the sign in particular cases. Right? There can't be anything inside your head that is telling you how to use the sign. And he says, okay, well, if that's right, then does that mean there is nothing controlling how we use the word in particular cases? That's really the root problem. There's nothing to say you're getting it right or wrong. So say what you like. And he says, well, can whatever I do be brought into accord with the rule? Let me ask this. What has the expression of a rule, say a signpost, got to do with my actions? So if you can think of a signpost, there's such a thing as a signpost getting it right or wrong, and using a signpost in the right way or using it wrongly. It makes sense to talk about right or wrong in connection with signposts. So what's that got to do with my actions? What sort of connection is there between a signpost and what I do? Well, the picture he's resisting is the interpretation of the signpost is something inside your head. You look at the signpost and you say, so arrow inside your head, that's the way to Dublin. You see what I mean? That's the natural picture. And he's saying, forget the thing inside your head. That's just an internal signpost. And the same problem arises for your understanding of it as arises for your understanding of the external signpost. So what connection is there between the signposts and my actions? Well, maybe just this one. I've been trained to react to the sign in a particular way, and now I do so react to it. You want to get to Dublin, you see the signpost, you go that way. That's all that happens. Forget the stuff in the head. The stuff in the head is like a fifth wheel. It doesn't really turn anything. It doesn't do any work. After all you've got there is an internal signpost and the same problems about how you interpret it. At the end of the day, you'd have to say, the signpost inside the head, I just see the signpost inside my head is pointing this way, and now I go that way to get to Dublin. But forget that shuffle. You could just as well say, I look at the external signpost, and I just go that way. That's it. That's the whole story. And then he considers this objection. But that's only giving a causal connection, explaining how it's come about that we now go by the signpost. Not what going by the sign, not what using the sign right really consists in. And then he says, on the contrary, I further indicated you can be talking about going by a signpost only insofar as there exists a regular use of signposts, a custom. So this counts as getting, when you get the signpost and you go that way, it's because you're in a community with lots of signposts around. You have this custom of using signposts. And it's in the context of that custom of using signposts that you can be said to be understanding the signpost correctly when you go that way. Okay, that's the picture. Nothing inside the head is going to help here. So what you've got to be looking at is some external custom of using signposts. This really gives a name to the solution. It doesn't, I mean, you've got to know what a custom is now. I mean, what is a custom, right? That is really the key question. I mean, it's kind of evocative, right? I mean, it's the way of my people, something like that. But the form of words he's using is for there to be such a thing as going right or wrong in your use of the sign, is for there to be a custom of using the sign. The existence of the custom isn't a matter of just having the right thing in your head associated with the sign. So then the next question is, what does it mean you're using a sign in accord with a custom? Yep, yep.
Doesn't the problem still arise for issues for arithmetic and logical?
Yes, absolutely the same question, yeah.
Because it seems as though the signpost is different in the way that, you acquire knowledge of the signpost and how to use the signpost from external causes. But for arithmetic and logical truth, it seems you derive your own understanding of it. And it's not like everyone else says what one is a true identity. It's that, you recognize that what each one is true. You recognize that they are true in their own virtue.
Okay, what does it mean you recognize that, what was the example, 1 equals 1?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
like 1 plus 1 equals 2.
Yes, fine. Both of these examples are fine. Okay, so 1 plus 1 equals 2. Okay, what's the picture you're giving of how you recognize that's right?
Like, what, 2 blocks together.
You put 2 blocks together, yeah. You just do it, right? This is just what you do in practice. You put the two blocks together. And why does that constitute getting it right or wrong? How can there be such a thing as getting it right or wrong in your case of putting blocks together or saying 1 + 1 is 2? They're just true in virtue of their arithmetic value. Okay, but how do you say what that arithmetic value is? What does that mean? Right, it's really important it peters out there, yeah, because everything you're saying is perfectly natural, yeah. But the important thing is you realize at the end of the day, the only way you have of explaining what you mean by that arithmetic value is by giving examples and saying, well, 1 plus the 1 after 1 is 2, for example. You see what I mean? So that talk about arithmetic value doesn't actually add anything. It's just a fake shuffle. It is a fact that you are getting it right or wrong in your use of the sign, but there isn't an external standard. There isn't a standard you're holding it to. Yeah, yeah.
It's a slightly bigger question, but like, what if you're adding, say, like 1,000 plus 1,000? You can't have, 2,000 blocks that you're adding.
Right.
It's sort of just an abstract concept that you have to form in your mind, and you have to explain it without really giving examples. You can't be like,
That's right. You can't, sure, of course that's right. You can't explain all of the application of arithmetic in terms of, all of the use of arithmetic in terms of actual applications. Yeah. The applications would have to be where we, at best where we start. Yeah. But pure arithmetic, of course there's such a thing as pure arithmetic and just doing in your head 1,000 plus 1,000. But the point about doing in your head 1,000 plus 1,000 is you're still at the level of concrete examples. Yeah? And there's nothing constraining what you do in these particular cases. Nothing in your head constraining what you do in these particular cases. Nobody's going to object? Something I like very much is the amount of resistance you guys have put up to this picture. I think it's wrong. I think in the end, resistance is useless. But but it's very important to see what a radical move it is. Yeah, and I think very often people agree with Wittgenstein. Yes, that sounds very good and deep and all that, without actually grasping what's going on. And if you feel the resistance, the urge, I mean, people sometimes talk about getting a kind of vertigo. That can't be all there is. There must be something holding the uses of language in place. You see what I mean? And there's that desire to grab onto something and say, I know what I mean. You see what I mean? I've got the standard here, the arithmetic value or something, and that's going to tell me what to do. But at the end, it's really important to see there can't be any such thing. Yes, good. Yeah.
So, suppose like you were just born with the cognitive state that forced us to interpret something only one way.
Okay, well, that would be causally forces you to interpret. By interpret, you mean give a definition?
Well, I guess what I'm thinking of is when he talks about how you point to something and it could be that you're supposed to trace it going towards the object.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, you could but point it. Children know how to react to pointing very, very early. Yeah, it's very important that children don't say, oh, it means that way going back through the shoulder. Yeah, it's really basic, sure.
Yeah, so as long as you know what it is to indicate something, because like I have my attention focused here or there, so I know what it means to like have my attention.
Okay, no, steady. Let's take this very slowly, right? It's a good Wittgensteinian point. It's a good Wittgensteinian comment that pointing and our mutual understanding of pointing is really basic to language. Yeah, but what does it come to? What does it mean to say that we understand pointing? All it means is I say, look, And you have this, I mean, we're trained out of it very early on by people saying, look, and then tricking you while you're doing that, right? But everybody has this thing. If I say, look, to direct their gaze at that moment to the place I'm pointing at, right? That's all it comes to that we understand pointing. I point there, and your natural tendency is to look there. There's nothing more to it than that. There isn't anything in your head telling you, the reason I'm pausing is you said, well, we know what pointing means or something like that. All that comes to is that I say, I point and you look. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, so I guess I was trying to say, like, isn't this another alternative where you do have meaning in your head? If, for example...
But what would the meaning in your head be? Formulate it. Can you formulate it?
Yeah, I'm trying to. So if, like, well, how, you can't say that, like, you were saying earlier that we don't have any, like, concepts just naturally without...
Well, we could do. I mean, I don't think we do, but I suppose we did.
Yeah, so suppose we had a concept of directing somebody's attention to something.
Okay. Well, all right. So you got a concept of directing somebody's attention to something.
As a child. And then you see somebody do this.
Yep.
And you just naturally hook up that concept to that motion.
Okay.
You don't think about it, it just happens.
Okay. Well, everything you say there is fine, but why do you even need the concept? If someone points and you look, that's it. That's the whole thing. And you say, no, I want this other bit of the machinery, the grasp of the concept that tells me where to look.
Yeah, I would say that maybe my personal experience is when somebody points somewhere. I mean, actually, in this particular example, you might be right. What I'm saying is that, like, the same thing could apply to different circumstances, a different example, might be pointing. But I'm saying that it could be the case, I think, that somebody sees a motion and they think, oh, that's weird, like, what could that mean?
Yeah. There is always the more complex case. Yeah, that's why I started out this with that brain teaser example, where there are more complex cases where you really are figuring out something in your head. In a way, to put Wittgenstein's point is that it often happens actually that the more complicated cases are easier to understand than the simple cases, if you see what I mean. There's all that structure in the more complex cases, like when you're doing a brain teaser, or when you're explicitly trying to figure out where should I look. And it's easy to see what's going on there. In the case of the simple pointing, when I just point and you look, then it's natural to model that in the more complicated case. Because you think, yeah, there must be something like that going on in there. But when you try and think it through, it always turns out to be impossible to actually specify how this is meant to be working. All you've got is the pointing and the looking. Yep.
If there's nothing in your head on the more simpler concepts, how could you possibly put them together to make more complex ones? There's nothing in your head to begin with.
Well, there's the language. I mean, there's the sign, add one, for example. That's what you're talking about putting together.
Something going on inside your head putting things together for the more complex ones, but I think if you're going to be interested in this theory, there's nothing going on in your head. You're just putting words together.
That shows that you can really be in the grip of this picture. Look, the picture that's being, what we're doing is we're explaining what it means to understand the concept successor, right? And you're saying if you don't have this thing in your head, then you don't have the concept successor. Yeah? I say you do have the concept successor, but all it comes to that you have the concept successor is that you can use it in all these individual cases. Given that you have the concept successor, of course you can put it together with endlessly many other concepts. That's what language is. But it just shows the grip, the depth of the grip of this picture, that you're thinking, well, if I don't have this, then I don't have any concept at all. Yeah? You do have the concept, but all it consists in that you have the concept is that you can use the term in all these particular cases. Having the concept is not something that lies behind your use and directs you how to use the term. 1 and 2.
So, does the deviant adder have the concept or a concept?
I'm actually going to come on to this at the end, but this kind of, well, actually, but let's come on to it now because sometimes I don't get to the end. In some cases, you might say of the deviant adder, oh, I can see what you're doing, and then you can see how you'd go on yourself. Yeah. But in some cases, like the one I was giving, you can't see what's going on there. Yeah. And these are really interesting cases, is where it seems to the deviant that, yeah, they're doing everything right. Yeah. But none of the rest of us can catch on to what they're doing. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. It's really a puzzling case. Yeah. Wittgenstein talks about this quite a lot, actually. We can't, I think all you can say there is we can't make anything of it. We can't take them into our linguistic community. You can't think of this as grasp of a concept. You have no idea what concept it might be. The difference, actually, let me just cut to the chase on this a little bit. Actually, this is good. This way I definitely get to the last point of the lecture. Wittgenstein's, this is hammering away at the basic point. To find the standards of right or wrong, you don't look inside the mind, you look at the customs or practices. And here's Wittgenstein. To obey a rule, to make a report, to give an order, to play a game of chess, those are examples of customs, uses, or institutions. You're not to look inside the mind, look out to these institutions or uses. Understanding a sentence means understanding a language, and understanding a language is being master of a technique. In the same way that a carpenter using a chisel is master of a technique, it's not that they've got something special information in their head. They are just really good at using this chisel in lots of particular cases. Having a word in your vocabulary is a matter of being master of a technique in that you can employ it in lots of particular cases. That's all it is. It is, of course, imaginable that two people belonging to a tribe unacquainted with chess should sit at a chessboard and go through the moves of a game of chess, and even with all the appropriate mental accompaniments. And if we were to see it, we would say that they're playing chess. So the rest of their people take it that this is strange stuff, what they're doing. We can't get behind this. We can kind of get onto it. Yeah? We would say they're playing chess. But now imagine a game of chess translated according to certain rules into a series of actions which we do not ordinarily associate with a game, say into yells and stamping of feet. So you can imagine that scene in the forest glade, right? And now suppose that the two people to yell and stamp instead of playing the form of chess that we are used to, and this in such a way that their procedure is translatable by suitable rules into a game of chess. So you just find this behavior that at first makes no sense, and then someone says, yeah, but you could map this into chess. And I think his point is, it's like my deviant. Yeah? You can't get behind this. You can't cotton on. You can't say, oh, I see what you're doing, and do it yourself. If it's all done in terms of yells and stamping of feet. If a chessboard is actually involved, that's different. Or he says, imagine someone using a line as a rule in the following way. So suppose you've got, I think what he has in mind here is something like this. You've got a line here like this, and he says, this is like x plus 1. This is how I'm going to draw, this is what the master that I'm going to use to draw my line. And what this guy does is, he takes a pair of compasses, which, do you know what this is? Yeah, like a pair of big, a hinged pair of pieces of wood with a kind of pointy bit at one end and a pencil or something on the other, yeah? And he draws one end here, along the line here, along the master line here, and he says, this is what tells me how to draw the line. But as he draws it along, he opens and shuts it arbitrarily. We can't see any rhyme or reason to the way this guy is doing this. Let me just... While he moves along the ruling line, he alters the opening of the compasses, apparently with great precision, looking at the rule the whole time as if it determined what he did. And watching him, we see no kind of regularity in opening and shutting of compasses. We can't learn his way of following the line. And here maybe you really would say, the original seems to intimate to him which way he is to go. He's looking at this line the whole time and saying, yeah, that's okay, so next is up here, and then I see next is down here. It seems to intimate to him which way to go, but it's not a rule. So this would be like the case of the guy who has x plus 1 running through his head, but goes 93, 104, 10, 11. You say that x plus 1, it seems to him to be telling him which way to go, but that's not a rule. There is no concept here. Yeah? Having a rule, having a concept is just when you're using the term in ways that other people can catch on to.
Okay, so I guess that means if there are a bunch of them and a bunch of me, like
A bunch of them and a bunch of you.
yes, there are a bunch of
Oh, yeah, yeah,
brothers,
yeah.
and they're
Yes.
all, I don't know, they're all related or something.
Right.
And then there's me and everybody else.
Your friends, yes.
And yeah, so what he's doing is not rule following to me.
What he's doing is not rule. Not rule following to me, yes, right,
But
right.
what I'm doing, I guess, is rule following to him probably.
Sure. I agree. This raises a whole bunch of questions about cultural relativism, yeah. In practice, I think these issues don't really come up because usually what happens when people encounter an alien people, yeah, when someone from Tokyo comes to London, at first it seems really strange, right? And you think, I can't they have their way and I have mine. But actually, people generally can get onto what each other are doing, yeah? However initially alien they seem.
I remember this, this is near the end of the selection through,
Yes.
where he's starting to get into, he's not saying, he says, okay, maybe it's not following the rule anymore, but we might call it something else like being inspired or in some.
Yes, that's right, that's right.
Inscrutable way. Like,
That's right.
Like an artist is inspired.
That's right, yeah, yeah,
So we
yeah.
could still see, I mean, I guess that's just a different way of seeing somebody as guided by something.
There's some broad sense in which you could say there's meaning in it.
Yeah.
Sure.
But it's just, it's not systematic from our point of view or something like that.
That's right. This is, I mean, it is deeply part of this picture that it's not intended to be disrespectful to people you can't understand, if you see what I mean. The important point is that the point of contact between you and another culture, another culture than your own, is just your ability to eventually get into the groove and understand how they do things. I understand how they do things in the sense that you can get the gist, you can catch on, you can do it too. It's not a matter of writing down and internalizing some rule book that they are following. Yep, that's the important thing about this. Yeah, the thing about the chess game is, can you catch on? Can you get the hang of what they're doing? Can you just watch for a bit and then do it too? Yeah, that's the important point. It's not, can you map into your head something or other? Yeah.
So, suppose I have just proven a new mathematical theorem.
Yes?
And
Yes.
yes, and I
Great
was-
case, yeah.
And I was really ahead of my time.
Yeah.
Nobody understood me. And when I die, like
Yeah.
years later, people come back and look at the proof and says, well, it's correct.
Yes.
So, I mean, at that time when I proved it, can I say that I understood it?
Can you say I understand?
Because mathematical rules.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no customs there actually.
Well, you were relying on a lot more basic customs. This is a very complex case, right? You're talking about some, I don't know, proof of one of these unproven conjectures, yeah, Fermat's last theorem or something, yeah, where it might require some very fancy maths, yes, and maybe it takes other people a while to catch on, yeah. But I mean, if you do that, there's a basic question: are you a nut, or have you done something good here? Yeah, I mean, if no one else can get it, then that is really the issue. And in fact, the only way we resolve that question is, can eventually other people get the hang of what you did? Yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, I don't wish to be pejorative here, but if you're doing it in your own and no one else can get the hang of it, there is a question, is this like the compasses? Yeah, is there really a rule here? You know, is there really a concept here? Yeah, and by that I don't mean something inside your head. If there were something inside your head, you could tell everyone else what it was, yeah, and that would settle the matter. But that's not the way it works. It works at this much more, like I was giving that example of Buster the other day. Can you catch on to the way the other people are doing it? Not, yeah, yeah.
It would seem that in that case, if people can't follow your mathematical proof, then you're deviating from pre-existing customs because they can't follow it.
If it's a new proof thing, you're doing something that people haven't done before. Yeah. Yeah, that is a really great example, and Wittgenstein really bites the bullet at this point. He has a whole book called Remarks on the Foundations of Mathematics, where he addresses, among other things, this kind of question: how can new proofs be possible? And it is actually a real problem for this picture, how a proof can be compelling. You know, how a proof can force people to the conclusion, because it seems like at every point there's a kind of free choice for the community to make. How shall our custom go in this sense, in this case? Because the ways of our people do not dictate. I mean, the people here, I mean mathematicians, the ways of people have not encountered this case before. So what shall we say in this case? It seems like it's a matter of free choice. Yeah? And he certainly comes very close to saying that. Anyone who hasn't raised a question? Okay, last one, and then we'll go on. Yeah.
If you teach your parent how to add.
You teach your parent how to add?
Your pet.
Oh, my parrot, right. It's very important to keep that distinction, yeah. Yeah.
And what's 8 plus 7? It says 15.
Yes.
As far as you have tested it, it always gives you the right answer. You are doing
Yeah.
it now.
Well, remember what Wittgenstein says here. To understand a sentence means to understand a language. He's thinking of this master. I mean, it's like asking, if someone could only use a chisel, would they count as a carpenter? Yeah? Part of the Wittgenstein's picture here is that the custom or practice is embedded in our whole form of life. I once spent a while talking to Irene Pepperberg, who actually had spent a lot of time training her parrot to do just the things you're saying. And she trained the parrot to use new sentences. The parrot could understand new sentences, could put together signs and combinations it had never heard before correctly, and so on. And every time she said, look, he now understands, like Alex, the parrot's name, Alex now understands, then philosophers and linguists said, no. Doesn't understand because he can't do this. And then Irene would train the parrot to do that. And people would say, no. And it's very natural to think, well, you know, what is the basis? What is the root basis of your resistance here to the idea that the parrot can talk? As you say, you know, it's very natural to say, oh, of course it can't. It doesn't really understand. Not the way a human does.
I don't know that I'm arguing that, but to argue that the parrot can't understand anything until you train it to do it, and now all of a sudden it understands, like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, but the reason for your uncertainty here is, I think it's caught exactly by these kind of passages that Wittgenstein says somewhere, if a lion could talk, we could not understand it. And the picture is that a parrot doesn't have the same kind of form of life as a human. A parrot has no conception of all the things we use money for. Numbers for, such as money or transactions. It doesn't embed into the same form of life. Understanding anything is a matter of understanding a whole language, and understanding a language requires, I mean, it's familiar to anyone who takes on board a foreign language that a lot of it doesn't make sense until you actually get some sense of how they actually talk. I mean, what they actually do in this country. You see what I mean? There's so much of learning a foreign language is a matter of getting something of the facts about.
Isn't it just doing it?
That's not a contrast. Sorry, are you trying to trip me up? What do you mean?
I mean, you're like, first you say there's nothing else besides just being able to use it right, and then you say, well, there is something else. There's like.
No, I'm saying that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, what I'm saying is, look at this. To understand a sentence means to understand a language. Yeah. Remember Campbell's thing about form of whirl of organism. Yeah. The whole network of senses of humor, shared interests, shared concerns, shared pictures of how the world is. That's what your use of the language embeds into. Yeah. That doesn't take back this picture of the x plus 1 telling you what to do. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, did you have a question? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's look at what Wittgenstein says positively about custom. Yeah, what a custom is. There's something very minimal, he says, of what it takes for it to be a custom. He says it requires that there should be many cases in which the word is used. You can't use a word right on just one occasion. Is what we call obeying a rule something that would be possible for only one man to do and to do only once in his life? And he takes it for granted you couldn't do that. I mean, could there be someone who added one just once and then no one ever did it again? Right? That makes no sense. Could there be such a thing as saying of someone that they fell in love just once, that one person on one occasion was ascribed falling in love, and then that term is never used again? And he says that can't happen. The use of a term has to be embedded into many occasions in which things happened, like a report being made, an order given, or understood. Hence, obeying a rule is a practice. And it's not possible to obey a rule privately, because that makes perfect sense if you've got this picture of an inner instruction that you're trying to follow. If there were another way to put the point about an inner instruction that you're trying to follow, is that it would be up to you to say whether you were following the inner instruction or not. In the case of the guy with the compasses, you say to him, are you doing it right or not? Sometimes he says, oops, I got it wrong, and goes back and rubs out something. Sometimes he says, oh, I got that right, that was great, that whole stretch there was perfectly correct. But he can do anything he likes. No one else has any idea how to correct this. So if you're having to keep faith with the rule privately, then thinking you're obeying the rule is just the same thing as obeying it. But it's just part of the phenomena that you can think you're perfectly right, but really be getting it wrong. This is something you've got to explain, and obeying a rule privately wouldn't allow you to explain that. But the trouble here is, the real trouble for Wittgenstein is to explain exactly what a custom is. There must be more to it than the mere existence of many cases in which we apply a word. If I do it just once, if I add one just once, then there aren't any standards of right and wrong. So suppose you do it 100 times. How could that make for the existence of standards of right and wrong? Yeah? And that's where this point about immersion in a foreign culture, something like that, this thing that we were talking about getting the hang of things is important, because it's when you get how the use of language is embedded into the whole of life that you get the standards of right and wrong coming in. So it's not the mere existence of many cases in which we apply a word. There's got to be something about the way that the custom is part of our form of life. That's the thing about the parrot, that the way that you're using the words has got to be part of that thing about whirl of organism, all these senses of humor, interests, what we take for granted in particular situations, the way in which that all beds in. That's the thing that makes us really resist the parrot. We think the parrot can't have language, can't have our language, because it has no way of sharing our broader concerns. What matters to a parrot is just not the same as what matters to you or me. Senses of humor, our senses of humor are not the same. Yep.
I feel like not every person's sense of humor is the same, and I don't understand what stops the parrot from coming into our culture. Like, I to us humans have language. So if humans compare language, why would there be something else magically separating out humans from parrots and parrots from dogs? Like,
I wouldn't completely rule that out. You might get a parrot that just talks like you or me, you know, goes to the shops, watches TV, does all that stuff. I'm not saying that's impossible.
I mean, like, different people have different lifestyles, but we can still communicate with each other, so, and understand the meaning of the words. So why can't the parrot also do it just because it can't breathe with us? Like,
Okay, I don't have it in for parrots. I'm just explaining why people feel such resistance. Yeah.
What does this theory actually say about it, though? Does this theory actually say that the parrot can't understand it?
Wittgenstein did not address parrots.
What do you think it says about it?
Well,
Like,
well, if the you're saying that I don't really think the issue about parrots is terribly central, but if a parrot can share our whirl of organism in that sense, well, were you here a couple of lectures ago? Yeah, I mean, I read out this thing from Campbell that tries to give the sense of it. I want to get on to Putnam in just a second, but we've talked about this a few times. And when I'm talking about the compass guy or the people with chess, I'm trying to give you the sense of what Wittgenstein means here. It is a difficult idea, yeah? It really is a difficult idea. But if you can really bring a parrot into that, that's fine. Then the parrot understands. I think the reason people are so resistant to the idea that parrots really understand our language is that they don't believe it. Yeah.
I do believe it bothers me though that we can have this concept of the world where you can quite put your finger on, but not the concept of an internal understanding of the word, which you argue you can't have because you're like, define it for me, define it, tell me what it is.
I didn't say define it, I said explain it.
Okay, and then
I said explain, and explaining is not a matter of giving definitions.
okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Explaining is a matter of giving examples. That's the point, yeah? And with whirl of organism, I explain it in just the same way. I give examples, yeah? And you keep wanting a definition, but the general point is the way you explain these key concepts is by giving examples. That's what Wittgenstein is doing. That's what these cases of the chess players and so on are trying to get you to. Now, if you're resistant and say, I don't understand it, and you look at a definition, then you will never understand anything. Right. So there are a lot of similarities between Putnam and Wittgenstein. Here is Putnam in his folksy, I guess I can say Yankee, can I? Wait. Putting Wittgenstein's point. Cut the pie any way you like. Well, I can't do it properly, but cut the pie any way you like. Meanings just ain't in the head. And you can see that there's actually a lot of connect here. And one way Putnam puts it is, you're a teacher trying to explain the meaning of the word water and saying, look, this is water, that's water, over there's water, there's more water. And then a natural picture is the child has to get the image of water in their head, and then the child can go on and say, oh, that's water, that's water, that's water, and so on. And Putnam's point about the image of water is very like Wittgenstein's. In fact, he quotes Wittgenstein in this. The image can't do any work. The image has to be interpreted. Just as with the man sliding downhill or walking uphill, an image of water needs interpretation. Whatever's in your head has to be interpreted. The image drops out. So if you ask, what is it for Putnam that means that we have standards of right or wrong here? Well, that's the same as asking, for Putnam, that's the same as asking, what fixes reference? And for Putnam too, it's not a matter of looking inside the head. It's a matter of looking out to the external environment and seeing what's in it, what substance it is that you're responding to when you're using the words. And in the case of some terms like gold or diamond, the experts in your community that you defer to. So to understand for Putnam how someone is using the word water or the word gold, then you don't look inside their head for the formula that will let you interpret the sign. You look out to the natural kinds that they're interacting with and the other people in their community. You look at their environment. Now, a contrast, so Putnam agrees with Wittgenstein on the negative point. They are both absolutely on the same page there. A big difference is that Putnam doesn't talk about custom or practice. Custom or practice are key terms for Wittgenstein that he's using. It's a semi-technical kind of notion, and he gives examples, but he doesn't take you very far with them. But it's a good question whether Putnam doesn't actually need something like Wittgenstein's notion of custom or practice. And after all, what Putnam's appealing to is causation. Yeah, Putnam's got causal connections to the environment, and he's got what he calls division of linguistic labor, the way that one person in a community can depend on other people in their community. But division of linguistic labor, does that term make sense? The way that when you use one word, you can be depending on there being other people who know a lot about it. Like if I say low temperature physics. Well, it must be very cold, but I mean, I couldn't really tell you a whole lot more than that. But I just assume that there are tons of people who know a lot more about it. But that just presupposes that for the experts, there's such a thing as going right or wrong. But then if you ask, how can causal encounters, how could causation of itself mean the existence of standards of right or wrong? Well, this is just where we went with Dretschke and Fodor. Can you really explain there being such a thing as going right or wrong on your use of language in terms of causation? Dretschke suggests a picture where you say, well, maybe what we have is that the biological function of our talk of water is to indicate the presence of H2O, right? Remember all that, the magnetosomes and all that? So you talk about the biological function that this thing is serving. But there were two problems here. One was, as many of you said, that it's not clear that the appeal to function is legitimate anyway. And anyway, being biologically optimal isn't the same thing as getting it right. And then Fodor drops the notion of function and says these asymmetric causal dependencies are what explain the existence of standards of right or wrong. And the point into which we left Fodor is that mere patterns of causal connections, and even causal connections that depend in different ways on one another, it seems incomprehensible how that could be enough for the existence of standards of right and wrong. So although Putnam's and Wittgenstein share the negative point, and they both share the look outward idea, Putnam's stuff about causation does not seem to be enough to ground the existence of standards of right and wrong. But with Wittgenstein, it seems like what he is trying for is for this notion of a custom or practice to explain, to hit that spot, to explain how there can be right or wrong in the use of a word. But here too, it's very difficult to be sure that this is like your reading task over the spring break. Look at the Wittgenstein and see if this is the way to characterize what he's after. Is it that the notion of a custom or practice explains how there can be right or wrong in the use of a word? Or does it just presuppose it? I mean, maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe characterizing the custom or practice, maybe you just have to already assume that there are standards of right or wrong in characterizing a custom or practice, and we don't have any explanation here. And then if that was how it went, the question would be, how can we live with that? How could we live without an explanation here and only a characterization of customs or practices? Or can we push this deeper and say, yeah, we can get out of this an explanation of what it is to be going right or wrong? Yeah.
Wittgenstein say we're using the word custom wrong if, like, in the back of your house you had a small shed and you were 8 and you had like a boys club, you know, and like so.
Yes, right.
Everyone's like, well, it's custom here to drink with our
Yes.
Doing that for like 5 minutes. I mean, what
Uh-huh.
determines how far back does the customer have to go?
Yeah.
Because then you can have the same thing, like you're using like you have a different standard right now on
Yeah.
your bedroom to be like a sibling,
Yeah.
and it's just like you guys, and then you go out.
Yeah.
I mean, like, so how far does the server customer?
Well, it can't be just once, right? He's clear about that. But if you ask how many, exactly how much, I think you're not going to get an answer to that. And I think, in fact, there's going to be a borderline. There's going to be a spectrum of cases there. If you think about that case, it is one thing if it's been our custom from time immemorial to drink with the left hand, yeah? But in the case you're describing, well, you know, there are going to be cases where you say, no, that's not really our custom, because after all, on special days, we all drink with the right hand. Or when it's Billy's birthday, we use both hands. Or, yeah, you see what I mean? I guess one question is, one issue is going to be, when it's reached the point where there can be discussion of what exactly our custom is, yeah? That'd be one criterion.
At that point, like reaching that point, it's not like it's fine.
Exactly. Yeah, this goes back to this thing about always demanding definitions. This is the wrong place to be looking for exact definitions. Okay, these have been fantastic discussions. You guys have halted at exactly all the right places, so I'm really happy with that. Thank you. Good luck over the break. Okay.